Tonight we've got a great panel on the power of one, local heroes in the fight to preserve biodiversity. This session, I think, epitomizes what we tried to do in our exhibit, showcasing the power of one. And if you go through the exhibit, you'll see we have many powers of one, including one of Sheila Globus here. We have the video power of one. We have how you can help. So we've really tried. We have pledged to make a difference in 2 places, tried to showcase what you can do to affect biodiversity. Our series tonight's going to be a webcast we have a collaboration with WGBH, and so that you can pull this up on the web when you want to. Before I go into the speakers, just to give you a brief outline, each speaker is going to talk for 15 minutes. Actually, they're sharing 15 minutes, so don't panic. It really is going to just be an hour. In this order: Center for New American Dream, Vernal Pool Association, and then Niaz Dorry. Before I turn it over to Sean, and our first 2 speakers will be Sheehan from Center for New American Dream and Sheila Globus. I wanted to say that individuals can cause extraordinary change. There's a recent account of a Nigerian that created a pot within a pot, which is a very simple method to refrigerate foods in Africa. So you use 2 ceramic pots, one within another, and you have sand, wet sand, in between the 2. And just by that very simple method, they can keep fruits and vegetables preserved for 3 weeks, when they used to not be able to do this at all. Then you think about the example of the Grameen Bank, the economist who started the Grameen Bank with a simple idea, micro-enterprise loans for poor people, and that idea took off like a fad, like a trend, and even up to the World Bank and Hillary Clinton, people have really gravitated to this notion. So our speakers tonight will talk about I'm hoping that by their suggestions and by their examples, we can be inspired for affecting change towards biodiversity. Okay, now first, Sean. Sean is the National Outreach Director at the Center for New American Dream. Employed with the center since its inception in 1997, Sean built the center's popular website, developed the Turn the Tide program, of which we're a proud partner, and we have their cards in the exhibit, and you can link directly through our website to the Turn the Tide program. I'm sure he'll tell you about that. So developed the Turn the Tide program of 9 actions for the planet, and now writes the monthly action bulletin, Step by Step, which is an action-based initiative Center for New American Dream has taken. Sean is also responsible for developing partnerships around these programs with communities and organizations across the U.S. Prior to joining Center for New American Dream, Sean worked for TV Free America and obtained a BA in Environmental Studies and Political Science from American University. He's a native of this area, Western Mass, and enjoys getting back to this area, to the hills and woods of New England whenever he can. In fact, he's coming back up here to do Center for New American Dream work, outreach in the New England area. Sheila is a native of Montreal, Canada. She's a former nutritionist, currently works as a freelance health and medical writer. She's written articles on nutrition and on women's and children's health for magazines, newspapers, and newsletters, both in print and online, including Family Circle, Lamaze Family Magazine, Alliance for Aging Research, and the National Women's Health Report. Sheila is active as a volunteer with a local grassroots environmental group in Sudbury, where she writes, edits, and publishes their newsletter, and is involved in outreach activities ranging from promoting recycling to educating homeowners about pesticides and their dangers. She's the mother of 3 teenagers. Okay, will you welcome our first 2 panelists, Sean and Sheila.
Great, thank you, Carolee. I'm excited to be here, back in Massachusetts, as Carolee says. Always happy to have a good excuse to come back, and am looking forward to coming back here on a more permanent basis to work with our members and people in this area. And I'm excited to talk about our Turn the Tide program of action as well. But before I do, I thought I would just take a second to say who the Center for New American Dream is, because it's one of those names that people who haven't heard it before kind of catches in your mind. What is it? What do they do? Who are those people? And we're sort of an eclectic mix of some returning Peace Corps people who come back to the U.S. and see that something seems out of whack with the more is better culture, the work and spend treadmill. We're also, a lot of our members are soccer moms who are trying to raise their kids in a hyper-commercialized culture. And we certainly have our tree-hugging environmentalists and social justice proponents who when they learn about that it would take 4 additional planets to provide the resources for everyone else, all 6 billion people on the planet, to live the lifestyle of the average American, realize that that model isn't sustainable or attainable. And we're real-life people like Sheila Globus, who will be speaking after me, who are seeking another model, living a new American dream. In all our programs at the center and campaigns, we try to weave 3 themes, 3 messages into them, and they all resonate very closely with the power of one idea. And they are: what you do matters, that each of us has an impact and it matters. 2, that we're not alone in feeling the way we do, or caring about the environment, or wanting to act in a certain way, even if billions of dollars in advertising budgets can make us seem isolated. We're not, and we try to overcome that. And 3rd, that it is possible to have more fun with less stuff. This movement isn't about sitting down in the basement shivering, trying to knit sweaters out of old mop heads. It is possible to have more fun with less stuff. And we incorporate that in all our programs, as I said. And what I'm going to talk about today, our Turn the Tide program of 9 personal actions for the environment, we certainly do. So Turn the Tide is a program of 9 simple actions that each and every one of us can take to have a measurable positive impact on the environment. And we have the online component, which Carolee mentioned, which can be linked from neaq.org or from our website, newdream.org, and from our other partners, in order to see that impact that each of us has, to report it and see it. And I'm sure everyone in this room, knowing the type of people that would come to an event like this, knows that ordinary people can make personal changes to help the environment. But Turn the Tide explains what we can do and demonstrates how it will make a difference. So I'd like to encourage everyone to visit through the website and take a look to see what the 9 actions are, how they can be taken easily, why they're important. But tonight I'm going to focus on a little bit of the strategy that went into behind developing the program and how we developed the rationale for it. And Sheila is going to talk a little bit about the experience. So in coming up with the program, we asked leading scientists and experts in the field of conservation, including a bunch of folks here at the aquarium a few years ago, what first steps they would ask Americans to take to reduce global warming, conserve water and energy, save wildlife, save forest habitats, what would have the biggest impact. And as you can imagine, we got a great list, everything from recycling, buying local, eating organic, getting a hybrid vehicle, getting rid of an SUV, moving to a smaller house, all across the board. And it was a terrific list. But then came the question, well, why, rather than putting out this list as it is, why aren't Americans already taking these actions? What are some obstacles that get in the way? And 2 big obstacles were a perceived disconnect between global issues and daily actions, and a feeling of powerlessness to affect change. This first statistic here I actually pulled from Carolee when we featured the New England Aquarium as the partner, our Turn the Tide partner in the spotlight a couple months back. And one stat that she quoted from the Biodiversity Project was that over 4 in 10 Americans think that what they do in their own lives don't impact the health of natural habitats. So as you can imagine, that's 40% of people whose the actions they take is impacted in that way. And we also had commissioned a poll a couple years ago, a national poll, and 2 in 3 Americans said they would do more to reduce energy use and protect the environment if they thought it would have a measurable positive impact. So if we come from there, are there any other things, if people want to shout out, I have a free More Fun, Less Stuff bumper sticker if anyone thinks of other obstacles that might stop people from taking those particular actions for the environment. Time. Carolee gets one. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah, having it be habit or routine. I can't reach over. I'll give it to you once I lose my mic, but I'll deliver it. So, yeah, money, financial is one obstacle. Yeah, a sense of sacrifice or choice. And one more?
It takes effort.
Yeah.
People are lazy.
Yeah, effort and that kind of. It goes with the time, but it's different than the time, and it's yeah. You guys all get bike stickers too if you want. Yeah, so these obstacles, many of the ones you said, the financial cost, perceived complexity, lack of time, and the information overload is there. The need proof up front, and several of the the others that you guys said as well are there. So we wanted to develop a program that would overcome those obstacles. We focused on of those list of actions we had that had a powerful impact. We focused on actions that could demonstrate links between global issues and our daily life choices. Actions that really were manageable and truly affected change. Actions that are simple, clear, and can either be free up front or save money very, very quickly turnaround. And because of the lack of time, we didn't want 50 actions or 1,001 actions, just focused on 9 that would have a big impact. And then finally, for needing proof up front, we wanted a web-based program where people could log on anytime, see what others had done, and see the exact environmental impact of that. So as I said, it was going to make you go on to neaq.org or newdream.org to see the actions, but I know sometimes the suspense can be too much. So I thought I would flash them quickly here. But as you can see, they're very simple things. They're incremental things like putting in energy-efficient bulbs or shifting from shrimp to more eco-friendly seafood with less bycatch, using forms on the website to get rid of junk mail. And the 9th action is really the keystone one in the sense for people who are already taking the other 8 or can't take some of the 8 can automatically triple your impact by inspiring a couple people to take those. And Sheila's going to mention that too. On the website, without having it here, the gist is we show the impact of it. So when you take action number 5, for example, putting in 4-complex fluorescents, you'll see that you save 1,000 pounds of carbon dioxide per year. If you put in 8, it would show you that you saved over 2,000 pounds. And together, to date, Turn the Tide participants have saved about 1.5 million pounds each year just by installing these compact fluorescent lights. And with the other 8 actions, so far we have over 13,000 people who are logging on to the website to report their actions. 100 partners around the country, groups from 1 Minute Warning, great, from the New England Aquarium and the Sierra Club to small groups like a conservation class up at the University of New Hampshire and the Vermont Earth Institute, and some churches and civic groups as well. 8 million pounds of carbon dioxide, over 100 million gallons of water, 17,000 pounds of sea life, and also the financial benefit, which doing it primarily for the environmental reason, but nice to have that as well. And simply from the CFLs, saving over $180,000 between the people who have reported that action on bulb costs and energy costs. So I think the final thing I was going to leave with would just be the audience of how we set up this program for. And really we see 2 distinct audiences, but the same program fitting both in different roles. One being the 2/3 of Americans who mentioned before who say they would do more to reduce energy use if they knew it would have a positive measurable impact. There's a couple 100 million people out there we see ready to take these actions if they can see the proof. And then we have the people who are probably already taking these actions and don't necessarily see the reason to report. But for them, it's a chance to walk the talk and to prove back to audience number 1 that these actions do indeed make a difference. And I thought I would just leave with the words from the Sierra Club and their angle. In the walking the talk, I think it's also providing groups that do advocacy work with the chance for them to walk the talk in their personal life to provide the integrity and balance to that work. So the Sierra Club said that the American public often associates environmental harm with the practices of producers rather than consumers. But consumption plays a large role in environmental degradation. Turn the Tide provides an effective and manageable guide to sustainable consumption choices that we wanted to share with the Sierra Club members and activists. And so with that, I thought we'd move to a member of audience number 2 right here, Sheila Globus, to take us through the experience.
Is that it? Okay. I always think I'm too short to stand behind these things. So I'll try to act tall, for whatever that's worth. Up. Is that better? You can tell I'm new at this kind of thing. Yeah, I sort of spent some time thinking about what this power of one thing means. And we do all my family and I do all this turn the tide stuff, and I'll get to that in a second. But, I always find myself thinking, what does anything that I'm just an ordinary person. I'm not a hero, and, I don't wear a red cape or anything like that. I'm just like an ordinary suburban lady with a family. And I often think sort of what could Sheila Globus possibly do that has any impact on anything beyond my little life? And I reminded of a story when years ago when we were living in Montreal, and I used to stand, at the bathroom sink brushing my teeth with the water running, and my husband would say, "Now, Sheila, you should turn the water off because the Colorado River is drying up." And I'd say, "What? Me and the Colorado River? Give me a break. I have absolutely nothing to do with the Colorado River." And sort of this disconnect between what we do in our lives and what else is happening out there. And I kind of realized that it's not just me standing there with the water running and the Colorado River drying up. It's me and a million other people like me. And I realized that sort of the power of one is this idea of a single action that is extrapolated to an entire population. That is an amazing thought, that you could do one thing, you and a gazillion other people all doing the same thing, and it really does have an impact, like, as I said, across a whole population. So I start to think, if I change one light bulb, well, it's a drop in the bucket, or all the light bulbs in my house is sort of, well, what difference does that make? But if it's not just me changing the light bulb, but everybody's changing the light bulbs to the compact fluorescents, that's a heck of a big difference. So there is sort of something to this power of one idea, and it's sort of, all of a sudden I feel more powerful than I've ever been led to believe I am as a consumer. And I think once you sort of see that connection and realize what the problem is, you can make a conscious decision to be part of the solution. And that's what my husband and I have done, just in terms of the kind of consumers that we have become. So we have done, you don't have any of the 9 steps up anymore, but we have basically done all these 9 steps. And I listened to what Sean was saying about the obstacles, and it's like non-obstacles. It's not, I have not been inconvenienced once. I mean, if I ask myself to take the light bulb example, if I ask myself, what is the service that I want to get from the light bulb? I want to get light. Well, I can choose, the compact fluorescent, or I can go with the old bulbs that use all this kind of energy and, is incredibly wasteful, or I can pick I'm still getting the same service. If my neighbor drives her SUV to the supermarket and I drive my little hybrid Prius, it's just a better choice, and there's no inconvenience to me at all. Plus, you tell people about it, and it sort of hits them in the pocketbook, and I tell them how much money, that I'm doing 50-something miles to the gallon and how little I spend on gas. It's like, gee, I can do that too. It's not really that hard. And I'd have to say I found that from every one of these things, we have done all these and beyond. And we're not inconvenienced in the least. I don't find it a time issue. It almost feels like a no-brainer to me to do these, and it has become a habit. This is just the way we live. We don't think about it. We happen to be a TV-free family. We have not owned a television in 20 years, even before we had kids. My husband and I we just got married. We didn't have a TV, and my kids will have friends sometimes. They'll say to them, how do you live without a TV? As if it's like such this impossible thing, and it's really not. It's just not such a big deal. And none of this really feels, I know that the impact is a big thing, but just in my little life, it's just not such a big deal, and it just becomes how you live. The other thing that I do, and Sean was sort of emphasizing point number 9, I have a big mouth, and I talk it up a lot to people, and people see how I live. I live just like everybody else, and I talk to people about these things. We actually installed a ground source heat pump in our house, and when we were doing it, they had to drill these. It's like 5 wells in the front yard, and people would be walking their dog, and they think, gee, what are you doing, drilling for oil? I made all these jokes, and when we told them what we were doing, because it's hard to live a little bit ahead of the curve, say, well, we have this, this geothermal heat pump going in, and the neighbors would joke and say, well, if you're really cold in the winter, you can come over to our house. They're sort of assuming that the thing wasn't going to work. And now they find out that we're actually saving a lot of money. I think we're kind of a zero emissions family now, or something like that. My husband has it all figured out. And they see, gee, it's, there is something to this. I can save money, live just like everybody else, and really make an important difference. Gosh, I look down this list, and we do absolutely every one of them. And I don't know how else to inspire you other than to tell you that my family and I have been living like this for, we're not perfect. We sometimes, I'll be in one room and I'll hear the radio going in the other room and think, well, that's dumb. Why are we using, no one's in there listening to the radio. But we really try to be conscious about these choices and to not just do everything on automatic pilot the way we've always been doing it. What else can I tell you? I didn't even use up my whole 5 minutes. That's it. That's all I want to tell you.
We're going to take a question or two for Center for the American Dream while we switch PowerPoint presentations. So please just direct your questions there, and please remember to repeat the question, especially for WGBH.
Sure.
Sandy?
So how do you get rid of your junk mail on the website?
The question was. The question was, how do you get rid of junk mail on the website, on the computer? And on the website, on Turn the Tide, from that 4th action, Declare Your Independence from Junk Mail, there's a link over to the Declare Your Independence from Junk Mail website, which is part of the Center for New American Dreams. And we have a form on there where you can enter in your address and state, banks, whatnot, and it'll print out 5 or 6 letters for you to send to the credit card companies, to the banks, to ask them to take you off their junk mail lists. From newdream.org. Yep.
One more question. What is
Sure. Eco-friendly seafood, and that's actually a good question, or good link in there to all 9 of the actions. Each one has a statement of why it's important, and 2, how to go about taking it. In the case of seafood, for the how section, the resources, we link over to another one of our aquarium partners, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, developed a seafood eating guide, and they give a green light, yellow light, or red light to different species of fish based on how much bycatch, how many animals are killed to get the type of fish you want to eat, birds, turtles, dolphins, whatnot. And shrimp, although it's the most eaten seafood, past tuna last year, is very, very ecologically destructive. But there's a lot of types of seafood that aren't, and have large enough populations and don't have as much bykill. And so there's a link to that site with a list you can print out and put in your wallet and bring to the grocery store with you.
Okay, we'll have time for more questions. So our next speaker is Kenney. Leo is a teacher of biology at Reading Memorial High School. His childhood passion for collecting frogs and choosing salamanders, I like your bird here, morphed into his life work when he founded with his students the Vernal Pool Association to encourage the identification, study, and protection of vernal pools. What began as an effort for a high school club to get other students to certify vernal pools has become a driving force for environmental education in Massachusetts. Endangered Species Program, interacts with students and teachers, and continues to develop activities to involve students and the public with vernal pool. Leo is the author of several publications, including a field guide to the animals of vernal pools. And we also have featured one of Leo's students and the Vernal Pool Association in the exhibit. He's got 10 minutes, and I'm going to beep him, so he has another 5. So the 10 minutes is not finished. You can page up each time.
And to move each page is page up.
Page, yeah.
Hello. I'm technology challenged, so I'm not used to using these. I come to this as a person who's always practiced power of one. I'm a teacher, and there's no way you can get away with being a teacher without doing powers of one. What you're doing with your life is influencing others. The Vernal Pool Association is an effort that I formed about 12 years ago, which was to give students the same opportunity I was having at that time for them to have an effect on the environment and on their friends. What started as a spur-of-the-moment club activity has taken over my life. It's what I do most of the time each day, and has been duplicated and is being copied by several states in the United States, Ontario, and other places that don't bother telling me. So with that in mind, what I thought I'd do is give you a bit of a biography of how I got where I am, what my consideration as a teacher has always been, when I look at a program, such as what we just saw before me and what we'll be seeing after, is you see the finished product and you say, how could I ever do that? And I think most of us, if we're going to do something as a power of one, get out there and do something, we don't necessarily have to have the global thought that we're going to have a magnificent project at the end. We just do something immediate in our own environment, our own locale, and see what happens with it. And see what happens with it, he says. We'll make up for it by going 2 or 3 at a time. The vernal pools, I'm not going to give you a biology lecture. I'm a biologist, and I can do this for hours or days at a time and just be cut off and just cut it off in 50-minute blocks. Vernal pools are these woodland puddles that you find throughout actually the world. But in New England, they're particularly common because the glacier gouged its way across the planet and left these depressions which fill with water in the winter. The same pool would, when it thaws, would support life, and sometime during the year, most of these vernal pools dry up. The effect is that the vernal pool has water for many months, but does not have water long enough to sustain populations of fish. So without having fish, you have a biological pressure for a specialized organism, one that can survive without fish, but also has the means to get to and from a wetland which periodically disappears. Vernal pools are found in many habitats. We see them in the forests, maple woods, hemlock areas, open fields, and even at the beaches. In the dunes of Barnstable, we have these interdunal swales. You have them otherwhere. You can find them in the dunes around Lake Michigan, everywhere. What makes vernal pools special are the organisms that use them or require them. In New England, the wood frog breeds only in vernal pools. It's a forest creature. In spring, it hops to a vernal pool, finds its mate, lays eggs, returns to the forest, all within a couple of weeks. Fairy shrimp can live only in vernal pools. They hatch out from eggs which are inundated as the pool fills. They mate, they live for several weeks, and then they drop their eggs to the pool bottom. After the pool dries, the eggs must be dried. They can then hatch the following year when the water comes back. These are small, less than an inch in size, greenish gold, swim smoothly with a rhythmic motion as they move their feet, and would be easily eaten by fish. There are 4 species of salamander that are relatively common in New England that require vernal pools. These salamanders are our largest. They're 6 to 8 inches in size, abundant, but seen by few people because they come out only at night or travel in spring or fall to these vernal pools to lay eggs. Once they lay the eggs, they go back to the woodlands, and their eggs develop as larvae and hopefully mature before the pool dries up. In New England, we have the Jefferson salamander, the marbled salamander, the spotted salamander, which comes as close to the charismatic megafauna that we can use to claim vernal pools are important, and one other which seemed to fall out of this hurried slide presentation we put together. I usually use regular slides, but that seemed to be more difficult here, so we did this today. So 4. And what brings us to where I am today and what's going on is that vernal pools were disappearing rapidly in our landscape due to human activities of road building, home construction, filling for parking lots or whatever else you want. And in 1988, the Wetlands Protection Act in Massachusetts was amended to include vernal pools as a type of wetland. And as part of recognizing them as a type of wetland and realizing that it might not be able to identify them all parts of the year, a provision was made that ordinary citizens could document these vernal pools as existing through a process known as certification. And by that means, the pool would be listed as being there. The intention was to be a convenience to the landowner so that when time came, in case of development, they would actually know what was there and they wouldn't have to wait a whole year to prove that something was or was not a wetland. Anyway, my classes, field biology, have been studying vernal pools and wetlands for 20 years or so. We decided this would be an interesting opportunity for the town in which I teach, Reading, Mass, to find all the vernal pools that were there. And over 2 years, we examined 117 wetlands and determined that we had 65 certifiable vernal pools, which we certified. And that was a project involving a couple of hundred students. A number of the kids in my other classes, I was teaching regular biology, decided that the high school seniors were having too damn much fun. They were leaving class, they were driving around town, they were hiking through wetlands at night, they were having a great time, and the younger kids wanted to get involved too. So offhandedly I said, well, why don't you put together a club and we'll teach other people how to do this, and we'll run little workshops and we'll have fun and this and that. One of the kids said, oh, I'll draw a t-shirt and we'll make money. Well, if you've ever dealt with student groups, you know usually the shirt you get is And anyway, the next day the kid comes in with this drawing, at which point I said, this might work for us. And with that humble beginning, we applied for an EPA grant the first year they had them for education grants, received $5,000, proceeded to run some teacher workshops, visit a few schools, and we're on our way. The difficulty we found was that there was not a lot of materials that weren't available. That is, that if someone wanted to certify a vernal pool, there was one booklet out, but it was too difficult for the average citizen to read. So with the kids, as they certified pools and we learned what we were doing, we started to develop educational materials. We put together a slide program, called it Wicked Big Puddles, and started using these slides to teach others what was going on. At the same time, people realized there was no paper publication, so I wrote a book called Wicked Big Puddles. We decided that vernal pools are actually just big puddles. And being New Englanders, of course, they're wicked big. The plan to educate groups one by one became clear pretty soon that we couldn't possibly handle that. So we moved to the model of us educating only the educators. And we, around 1995 or 96, 97, came out with the Diving Into, the resource book, which contained all the slides that we were using as the slide program, 7 slide scripts, teacher resource materials, and other stuff, so that anybody that took the workshop or bought this book could completely do everything we were doing and didn't need us anymore. Since 1996 to now, over 1,000 of these teacher resource kits have gone out to teachers either by purchase or through workshops. I got involved with Simmons College and Tufts University in 96, 7, 98 with the EnviroNet program, and as a Wright Fellow at Tufts University. I took 2 years of leave from Reading High School to develop vernal pool programs and worked with 300 teachers from across New England through Simmons and began the other series of workshops that we did. With a lot of this work, Mike Harney, who is with me tonight at Reading High School, was the graphics teacher. And about 10 years ago, we partnered up and realized that we were both taking the same approaches to education, that art and presentation require the same skills as science. And science requires presentation. Presentation requires a topic. And so our both skills started to come together to make materials that looked good. Teacher workshops, a bug. A turtle. Perfect. At present, I teach field biology. The students I have in field, that's the only thing I'm teaching. Half my day is covered. I don't need. I guess you have to talk to know if it's on. Half my day is covered by grant money, so that I teach 2 classes, and for 3 periods or whatever, I'm able to work on developing educational materials or visiting other schools and so forth. My students, the field biology, the major thrust of the course during the year is the study of vernal pools. They will study them for 3 quarters of the year, and the last quarter of the year, they have to develop an outreach program. I'm back again. I won't move. They have to develop an outreach program. As a result, this course is a project-oriented course in which they study vernal pools, and then by the time the year is over, they have a chance to use their knowledge to produce something that will be useful to somebody else in the future. Hello again? Okay. I'll keep repeating the same thing. An example of some of the things they've done is the series of posters that we now sell to teachers.
Another mic?
Or a battery.
A battery?
I'll just keep talking.
Yeah, I think you're just going to have to talk.
Well, I probably should just remove it because otherwise I'll be yelling and it'll come on and we'll all die. And I'm much more used to this anyway. I think most of you will probably be able to hear me.
Can you all hear me?
That was a great question. How did they know what you asked? Currently, the students have to produce some type of an outreach project. So each of these posters, we can now have a series of 60 of these, which we sell and give to teachers through workshops. Each was designed by a student and then peer edited by dozens, sometimes over 2 years. So each of these students have left a legacy to others, something they learned, something they studied, in some cases the photography they did. The pictures on the right of the gray tree frog, this student knew he needed that pose, and he worked for hours getting the frog to sit that way until he finally got the picture he wanted. It ended up with me doing the camera and him twirling the frog to get it just the way he wanted it. We decided this model worked so well, we passed it on to others, whereas we will now say to a teacher, you teach grade school or elementary school, each of your students is learning something, and once they learn their little piece of education, they are an expert on that one bit of material. So why not take that material, have them study it, write about it, draw about it, send it to us, and we'll produce it into a poster, which they can put out in their community and educate the community. And the past few years, we've done 60 of these with schools across Massachusetts, and this year we've opened the program up to other parts of the country. This would be a second grade class from Wilbraham doing an alphabet on a vernal pool after several visits to one on the property. We have a website, as does everybody. We started ours in the early 90s. Before there were browsers, it was all on text. But at present, it outlines the various programs we're doing. And I don't think I got it all on here. No. We're currently running a fairy shrimp survey. We're asking citizens of the state to send in pickled fairy shrimp so we can determine the distribution of the 2 species that are in Massachusetts. We're doing a mosquito survey to determine what kinds of mosquitoes use vernal pools. And we're doing a survey of general invertebrates, which is being sent to University of Oklahoma to be compared with other vernal pools in the country to see if some sort of a study can be made of diversity and similarities. all of this comes from starting with a bunch of kids and saying, sure, why don't we form a club and do something so you can take what you know and pass it on to somebody else. And we continue to try to come up with programs where we can do this for other people. And that's just simply where we are. Begin with one and just keep doing it.
Leo can take a couple questions before we switch to Niaz.
One of you.
I'm from Danvers, and I've been to your high school and knew all about your vernal pool association through my high school teacher, so it's really an honor to meet you. Thank you. I still recommend it to people when they ask about vernal pools. I know Reading High School has a club, teach them how. But I know a lot of people in my area are unsure about vernal pools because they think that they breed mosquitoes, and I don't want a lot of mosquitoes in their backyard. Is that true? Or
Is it true that people feel that way? It's both are true. Vernal pools do have mosquitoes, and but they also have organisms that eat the mosquitoes. And the question would be really is, what are the mosquitoes in the pool? Do they affect you as a human being, and do they possibly carry disease? And the answer is not entirely clear. But a healthy vernal pool has very few mosquitoes compared to other types of water bodies. And the ones that are worse are, of course, just tubs of water sitting around the yard. Spare tires and that type of thing, which carry the Culex mosquito and others like that. The other thing I always tell people is mosquitoes can fly for 4 to 5 miles. So the pool next to you is not the biggest problem. It's the large swamps and other things that are around. Do I get one more? She's not looking. I do.
He does.
I know how to hijack a group. Massachusetts Audubon Society was very much involved with the writing of the legislation. And Mass Audubon is an important group to be dealing with in Massachusetts. A bunch of us were involved in an informal state salamander survey in 1982 to determine how many of these vernal pools and what kind of things there were across the state and what impact was already happening. And that first survey showed that there were a lot of pools, but they were disappearing rapidly. And that became the impetus for people working on the legislation. I bowed out at that point and didn't come back in until the legislation was passed.
Okay, we have.
She looked.
All right, we're back on track. Thanks a lot, Leo. I've known Niaz Dorry since 1998 when she was with Greenpeace. Greenpeace was one of our earlier partners on the values-based approach in Papua New Guinea with the faith community. And we were trying to figure out a way to link the work that she did with the faith community in Gloucester and fishing communities with Papua New Guinean foresters and fishermen. Never worked out, but anyway, I've known her since then. Niaz was a toxics and oceans campaigner with Greenpeace for 11 years until the spring of 2001, when she began her career as a freelance activist and an occasional writer focusing on global economic and environmental justice issues. Before that, she worked on a number of economic justice initiatives in California, her home state. Today, she works on 3 primary areas: stopping the further spread of persistent biocumulative toxins and their impact on human health in the food chain, bringing a halt to the industrialization and privatization of the world's oceans, and as a graduate of the Rockwood Fund's Leading from Inside Out program, Niaz has begun consulting with groups who need facilitation or looking to improve their long-range strategic vision. In her work, she works closely with fishing community organizations from around the globe, focused on the rights of the small-scale fishing communities while preserving marine biodiversity. In 1998, Time magazine named Niaz as a hero for the planet for her work with fishing communities. Her fisheries articles appear regularly in a range of publications, from the Fisherman's Voice to the Earth First Journal. She's also involved with the Massachusetts Precautionary Principle Project, a collaborative effort aimed at reducing toxic threats to child health and environment by promoting the role of precaution in policy and decision-making processes. Niaz Dorry.
Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for coming tonight. When you hear somebody talk about you, it sounds a lot more sophisticated than it actually is. It really isn't. That was kind of weird to listen to. I wanted to, I guess, start by talking about one thing. When I heard the title of the talk, it was The Power of One. Sort of little bells went off in my head, because I have this thing about people being, I guess, raised to a higher level than other people that are doing the work that they're doing. And I kind of feel like it, at least for me, my opinion is it could be counterproductive. It creates imaginary heroes and imaginary whatevers, and it often takes away from other people's ability to see that they can actually make a difference too. So I'm much more, and I guess that's part of my organizing strategy as well. I feel like an old friend, I didn't know him for very long, but I had the pleasure of working with him. His name was Ken Sarawiwa. He was from Nigeria, and he was killed. Actually, he was hanged by the Nigerian government for fighting against shale oil and drilling over there. And when he was at the gallows, he had a quote, "Lord, take my soul, but the struggle continues." And I think that's a really poignant point. When we talk about power of one, we have to make sure that we don't consider ourselves indispensable, that we are always working in a way that the torch is passed on to a number of people. As we've seen here, the efforts that are going on are all efforts to spread the wealth, spread the message, so that if something like what happened to Ken happens, the fight isn't halted. So I just wanted to put that in as for the power of one thing. I think it's really important. The second is I'm supposed to talk about biodiversity and in particular about ocean stuff. And I put the whale up there because most people associate the oceans most often with whales, and Greenpeace in particular with saving the whales. And to be honest with you, I was working on toxics issues for Greenpeace. As a community organizer, I worked in, I often would live in a community that was hosting a toxic facility. And the last community that I worked in was a toxic waste incinerator, the world's largest in their community in East Liverpool, Ohio. Community was fighting the WTI incinerator. And when I was asked to switch campaigns and go to oceans, here I was working with kids that can't breathe, dealing with cancer clusters and people who are losing their lives daily, either because of illnesses from a facility that is right in their backyard, or because they're actually putting their lives on the line one way or the other. And so it was really a challenge for me to wrap my head around the whole concept of saving the whales. I saw it as frivolous, actually, to be honest with you. I was very, what's the word? I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I was working with a whole different body of the world's population at that point. And so I started to look into it. I thought, so what's about all this whale stuff? What is this all about? And the reason I was asked to work on this was because the campaign had, interestingly enough, thought that, enough of this bringing a charismatic megafauna to people's forefront, because it's only getting us megafauna. Did I say mega? Yeah, it's mega, definitely mega, megafauna. And I thought, they were thinking, enough of this. We really need to work on a different level than we haven't done before. So they chose to try working with fishing communities and actually do something that environmental groups hadn't intentionally done before, which is to actually move somebody in a fishing community with the intention of organizing fishermen around a common message. Or actually, I should step back for a second. Actually, to help identify if there are any common areas between environmental groups, in particular Greenpeace and fishing communities. And if so, then organize around those issues together so that we can also dispel this whole notion that saving the oceans or saving the planet or doing whatever means losing jobs. And that job versus environment myth, we wanted to dispel it. And so I moved to Gloucester, and I had never been to New England before. Actually, when I was doing some research to see whether or not I wanted to do this work, I found an article, a New York Times piece or something. There was a picture of a fisherman mending its nets on Gloucester Harbor. And I read the caption, and I called up a friend of mine who lived in Boston. This is kind of embarrassing to admit. But I called him up and I said, hey, listen, I think I'm going to do this fish work, and I'm moving to Gloucester. And he said, well, the first thing you got to do is learn how to pronounce it. Now I've figured out it's Gloucester. And that is how you say it. So anyway, so I've moved to Gloucester, and little by little, I've managed to wrap my head around the save the whale concept and what it all means. And I think the most important thing that I've taken away from it is really the whale is just in the way of a much larger fight of movement of global capital. Really, that's what it really was for me. And I realized that just like with an incinerator, where there is human collateral damage, economic collateral damage, there's the same thing with whale. There are people in fishing communities that are affected by this whole issue of saving the whales in many different ways. Most importantly was the whole issue of ecosystems. And what really triggered my interest were two things really in the marine issue. One was, after I went on a fishing trip, one of the first things I did was start going fishing. Because I was a vegetarian for 20 some odd years, to be honest with you. I didn't even know what a cod looked like. And so I figured that what I needed to do was actually learn all this stuff. And it also was a good opportunity to actually see firsthand and talk to some fishermen. So I went out fishing, and my first fishing trip, I went with a jigger out of Cape Cod. And I was bringing up fish, and he still laughs about it because I was bringing up fish, apologizing to every fish that I was killing on deck. And then we were dressing the fish, and I found other fish in its stomach. And, that whole organizing bumper sticker suddenly came to life right before my eyes. You guys have all seen the big fish eating the little fish. And so I suddenly realized, my God, that's actually true in real life. And so I asked what was the fish inside, and it was a herring. And from that moment on, I just had this phrase inside my head. I think Hillary Clinton had just came out with her book, It Takes a Village to Raise a Child, and I realized it takes an ecosystem to raise a fish. And it takes an ecosystem to save a whale. And it takes an ecosystem to save the cod. And it takes an ecosystem to save fishing communities. Without it, it won't happen. It's one of the biggest criticisms that I have of the way fisheries are managed, or even the way fishery conservation groups ask for action. It's very single species oriented. It's about saving one species at a time or hammering one species at a time because our tastes are demanding for it. And the whole concept that it takes an ecosystem is lost in this process. Again, looking at the whale here, and I may never get through the rest of my slides, and that's okay. I always hesitate to talk badly about other efforts because I know how much effort it takes to put something forward. But when we advocate for what species to eat and what not to eat, the role of that species in the marine ecosystem is not taken into consideration when those formulas are looked at. For instance, when you look at the green, red, yellow things, which I think they have their place, the little seafood guides, but you have a species that's very critical to the diet of many species, actually in the marine ecosystem, on the green list, and that's herring. And herring might be available in large, abundant enough numbers for us to go out and catch them more, but the more you catch, the less these guys have to eat. And so if you want to save the whale, you got to think about what it eats. And the herring also happens to be eaten by cod, by haddock, by bluefin tuna, by just about a million things. The Sicilians have a nickname, the way I understand it, for herring. It's called the ocean's candy. And there's a reason for that. It's actually eaten by a number of different things. And so while we work, and just to give you a little drama, to stop the whales from being harpooned, from the harpoons being aimed at the hearts, we have fishing nets about as big as baseball fields aiming at their stomachs. And so it's really critical for us to think about the kind of fish that we eat. When somebody asks what's an eco-friendly fish, the recommendations I often make to people is eat fresh fish, stay away from from farmed fish, eat variety of fish, because every time we focus on one species rather than another, that's the next species that's on the overfished species list. And so I really recommend to people to eat variety of fish, and also to eat fish, and this is kind of a long way of saying it, eat fish that looks about as close to what it looked like when it was alive as possible. And why do I say that? Because fish fingers, fish sticks, all this stuff come from a very industrial scale of operation that's actually endangering ecosystems. In the North Pacific, where pollock that you eat in Gordon's Seafood or McDonald's Filet-O-Fish or Burger King's whaler, that comes from a large biomass of pollock that actually feeds the whole North Pacific ecosystem. The debate is out still whether or not that high extraction, and I call it an extraction, we're no longer fishing at those industrial levels, we're actually extracting. At those levels of extraction, what does it do to the ecosystem? Some people say, oh, there's more pollock than we know what to do with. The same thing they're saying about herring out here in the Northwest Atlantic, and therefore we can do whatever we want to do with them. But those formulas don't take into account the role of the rest of that ecosystem. And so those are my recommendations for people who want to figure out what to eat in terms of seafood. Fish don't have fingers. Fish aren't square, and there's a little thing that says it in there. But most importantly, the last recommendation I have for what it's worth is ask questions. There's that ad that it's an anti-drug ad, says questions who, where, what, when, sort of a concept, the anti-drug sort of a concept. And I think those questions are just as relevant in saving biodiversity, the asking who, what, where, and when. How was that fish caught? Where did it come from? Who caught it? Those questions are very important in the future of the oceans, because until we start asking questions, the chain of accountability starts with those of us who want to eat seafood. And until we start asking the question from the waiter, from the cook, from the seafood dealer, even if they don't know, just the fact that they think people want to know gives them the thought that, okay, now the accountability is on me. Now I have to find out where the fish that I'm that I'm serving comes from. So those are just some general recommendations that I always offer people in terms of what to eat and what not to eat. Now, when I started to work on fishery stuff, I was trying to figure out a focus. And as Carolee said, I've been focusing on industrialization and privatization of the oceans. And that's because when I first started to work on this stuff, I realized that, number one, those are the two things that we have in common with fishermen. Most fishermen that I was in touch with recognized that industrial scale fishing and privatizing the oceans, which I can get into both if you want a little bit more if we have time, are actually the biggest threat to their livelihoods. As they consolidate, get rid of more and more small fishing boats, we're really not getting rid of fishing efforts. There's a cartoon here that I want to show you. Maybe I don't know where it went. Hold on a minute. Sorry about this. I'll find it. Oh, I can't find it. Sorry about that. We'll leave that guy on for a while. There was a cartoon that had, actually I did find it. I just ignored it. This was run in the Commercial Fisheries News, actually, in 1994. And there was at a time when they were talking about closing down Georges Bank for the first time. And what was interesting is while they were talking about getting rid of all these boats down here, which was representing the small-scale boats down here, at the same time there were proposals and there were rumors. There was actually factory trawlers, large-scale fishing vessels, industrial-scale fishing vessels, coming to the Northwest Atlantic. It turns out they've been trying to come for herring. But regardless, the thought here is you get rid of these boats, and who's waiting in the waiting, so to speak, to take over the oceans? And I think there's a real concern about that. And people often ask me, as somebody who advocates for a stop to overfishing, why do I even bother working with fishermen? In fact, one of the biggest challenges I had when I first started to work on this stuff was from conservation groups and friends actually thinking I was a traitor for working with fishermen. But what it really boiled down to for me is we have choices. We're given choices in our lives every day. We're being given a choice today when it comes to seafood consumption, whether or not we want to support the sort of an agribusiness, industrial scale fishing operation that is not only affecting the biodiversity of the ocean, it's doing the equivalent of agribusiness to the oceans. It's also getting rid of the equivalent of the small family farms of the oceans, the fishermen. Now, what's so important about those guys? People say they're the ones that have done all this stuff to begin with. They made their bed, they have to lie in it. But when I start to read about the history of where things really went wrong in fishing, and start to read, like at the turn of the century, books written at the turn of the century, which is really about when things took a massive dive, was when really industrialization of the oceans really began, with larger and larger vessels going further and further out to sea, defying the nature's will, defying weather, defying just about everything, and really started to focus on making sure they can get particular species of fish 12 months out of the year. It wasn't like that before. People fished for something in the spring, they fished for something else another time, they fished for something else another time. And that diversity actually was helpful. The fact that they were going out a few miles, or maybe even further in some cases, and coming home, it was critical. These guys stay out. They never give anything a break. These guys have to come home. that travel alone is a break. The little pool of the ripple effect in the economic pool of those communities is really important to the health of the oceans. These folks, when they go out, they have to think about what they're leaving behind for their community and for the future generations. These guys have other ports. They're mobile. They have the fiscal and the physical mobility to go somewhere else. And in fact, when I've done a chart, which is somewhere in here, but we won't get to it, where you can track the decline of a number of species to the point where industrial-scale fishing operations was introduced to those fisheries. And so there is definitely a trend that happens here. And I'll wrap it up in just one second. And so that's where I decided to focus on, was industrialization. Not only was it important to the fisheries, the fish that we actually eat, it was also important to marine biodiversity and the ecosystems. These guys, the nets are much larger than these guys. The operations are much larger. They bring up more, like I said, it's extraction versus fishing. And for me, that's a huge difference. So we're faced with a choice. Do we want to go the agribusiness route? Tyson's, Caterpillar, ConAgra, which are already in fishing, by the way, all of those that we know of the damage that they've done to our soil and to our food. Or do we want to go to the small-scale fishermen's route? Not perfect. By no means are they perfect. But for me, if I have a choice, I know what this hand has proven in the past. And this hand hasn't done that well, but they have the potential to do better. And they have the potential to do better by one fisherman at a time deciding to make a change. And that's where the power of one comes right back into play again. So thank you very much for your time. That's okay.
Okay, we're going to do questions. We're running just a little bit longer, so those of you who have to leave, we'll do questions for another 10 minutes or so, I think, and then we have refreshments outside, and Ken Mallory wants to make an announcement about our next talk in the series, too. Do you want to do that now, or do you want to do that after questions?
Sure, I'll do it really quickly. I read this last week, mixing it up with what we were going to see this week, but and Michael Charney, who is the moderator for next week, is here in the audience. It's called The Power of Many: Profiles of Town Environmental Actions. It features Michael's work, Betsy Johnson, Executive Director of Chefs Collaborative, Dan Rubin, Vice President of Green Decade, and Sue Plukier, Regional Organizer for Mass Biodiversity Days and Executive Director of Village River Environmental Center. So it will be here, same time, same place. Please tell your friends, and please come again.
Okay. Now we'll take questions. Please repeat the question, please.
For WBH.
I have a question actually for all four of you, and that is, I wonder, as an individual trying to make a change, what obstacles you face and like derision from your peers, etc., and how you then keep on going even though that
Okay. The question was for all four of us, and it was for each of us personally. Did we lose me?
Yeah.
Is it bad? For each of us personally, what obstacles do we face in making these changes? I'd say for myself, probably some of the obstacles or challenges lie in working for a national nonprofit, in the sense that so much of this work happens on the ground level and is the ground basis, and doing that outreach. And I think the tension in there is always a challenge. Certainly in traveling, to the extent you have to travel around the country, that can be can be difficult to walk the talk there. To the extent that we can stay within the Northeast, was able to take the train today instead of flying. So that was a better environmental impact there. If we had to go out to California or Washington State or whatnot, that would be harder to do. So I would say that's one obstacle there, and it's part of, I think, as Sheila and others said before, it's recognizing that none of us are going to be perfect. We're all limited by the infrastructure that we face, and we do the best we can. And don't beat ourselves up over it. Stay positive, and think.
I'll just hold it. Okay. Yeah, I think, gosh, sometimes it's really hard to be the first one to do something, and it gets lonely. But if I'm out there and I just happen to be talking it up, whatever we happen to be doing, and someone will say, "Oh, yeah, you do that too," and you always sort of encounter someone, and that's really empowering. Because there are other people out there. We're just sort of not, in some ways we're kind of not organized, but there are lots of people out there that are trying to make these changes. And when you kind of connect with them, even on a one-to-one basis, it's really incredibly empowering. And that really sort of motivates me to, go, yeah, I know we're doing the right thing, and we're just going to carry on. So that's what we do.
The biggest limitation is the lack of time. And with each success, the time becomes more critical, not just locally, but further out, where people would like to duplicate what I'm doing and could easily become a time sink again by saying, come to Colorado and help us develop a program. So much like we don't teach an individual class anymore, we provided them with the materials. I do the same thing with whatever I've done and simply say, everything I've written, photographed, whatever is yours. You do something with it so we don't have to move out. But it's always time.
Mine actually is that whole power of one thing, to be honest with you. I think there's just not enough people. And when you happen to be echoing a message that might be new to some folks, you end up being one of the few people who are doing it, and then your brain starts going wacky a little bit. And so you get just too immersed in the issue, and so really trying to find more people to echo the message and not be that one person is probably my biggest challenge. And how I overcome it, frankly, unfortunately, I've lost way too many people in this fight in terms of friends and people like Ken, the woman I mentioned, the incinerator in East Liverpool, Ohio. One of our activists died within a year after the facility was operating from cancer. And in fact, the court said that, 1 year a facility will kill this one particular person. She was a farmer. And from her deathbed, she asked us not to let people forget about this. So there are very particular and very significant people that I've met through this whole time that have given up their life for this work. And when you think about that, they've made the ultimate sacrifice. So I guess all I have to do is just keep going, and that's my motivation.
Michael?
Is it Niaz?
Yes.
How do you pronounce your name?
Niaz, like your
Niaz.
knee and the
Yes. Very interesting what you're doing. Could you explain how you've organized within the fishing community and what you see as your agenda, or how you see that organizing moving toward what kinds of policies or what kinds of actions?
Okay. The question was how. But thanks for finding it interesting, first of all. And how do you go about the organizing effort, and then what's next, and how do you actually go about making some change using in this sort of a area? Am I right? Did I capture that right? Well, the biggest organizing tool that I used was actually moving to a fishing community. The opportunities that gave me were immense. I wasn't really sure what it was going to be like, but just that one-on-one conversation, people seeing you as a human. People sometimes think, oh, somebody works for Greenpeace, just as we as people who work in the environmental community or whatever community, we have our preconceived notions of what our so-called enemy looks like and what the other side looks like. People have that preconceived notion about people who work for Greenpeace as well. And so to dispel some of those and to actually listen, it was actually very helpful that I didn't know anything about fisheries or fish, because I had to listen. And I found that one of the biggest frustrations fishermen had that I was dealing with was people coming into their communities and telling them everything that they need to hear. And to actually sit down and listen and to learn from them gave us an opportunity. Going out on fishing boats was another great organizing opportunity. In fact, listening to the marine radio was an amazing organizing opportunity in itself. So, but I literally traveled from fishing community to fishing community, starting in New England and then spreading out throughout the country, and then on a global scale, doing the same thing, walking the docks, asking if people would take me out fishing, and then involving fishermen in the actual process of doing this work. I think one of the biggest compliments we got was when we were fighting against factory trawlers coming for herring in 1997. We took a delegation from Gloucester to Washington, D.C., that consisted of a cross-section of the community, from a clergy to a naval architect to a fisherman to actually the guy who now heads the Bread and Circus seafood thing, Steve Parks, and city council. But anyhow, it was like a very interesting broad section of the community. And we went, and one of the staffers said, "This looks like the Norman Rockwell painting." And so to be able to actually show people that this is what a fishing community is, and this is and the ecological reasons and the economic reasons to actually support their efforts was really helpful. Where does it go from here is building on that, building on this agenda really requires doing a lot more work in fishing communities. We've had some setbacks for various reasons, and I'm actually curious to see myself where it goes from here. There's it's a changing platform, I guess, if you will, because while you're working on this is a very long-term vision, and it's really hard to get people to think in long-term pictures when people are faced with another cut in their fishing efforts, or the environmental groups are dealing with yet another species declining, and everybody is in a crisis management mode. To actually get people to think about, forget about the crisis for the next 3 months. The crises happen perennially in fisheries, and it's really important to stop at least once and stop and think, okay, there's a reason this crisis is happening perennially, and what do we have to do to get to the root of it? But unfortunately, there are very few people who are thinking on that level, and there's a big need for that, and that's where I think that's why I'm writing about this stuff, to try to introduce this to some more of the public.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions. I think there are.
What are your priorities right now in your What are you excited about, and what message are you trying to get across to the public, to specifically the fishing community?
The question was, what are my priorities at this particular time? About fisheries issues or just career-wise? Okay. Well, the fisheries world, it is really, I found that the work that I was doing and the things that I was talking about ranked true with a lot more fishermen than it did people in the conservation community. And so one of I had a chance to meet this guy named Bill Urey. You guys might have read his book called Getting to Yes, which I immediately dismissed when I first saw it because I thought, we need conflict. We just can't be resolving it. But anyway, that's a whole other story. And when we were talking at one point, he was telling a story, and it was very humbling to be in his presence because with interspaced in his lecture, he would tell you of all these experiences of mediating the peace talks, in Camp David and doing this and that. And so when he was talking about Camp David, he talked about Anwar Sadat and how he was speaking in Israel a lot. He went to Israel a lot to meet the folks there and to actually be a presence there so people could see his face. But one of the things that he criticized himself about apparently was not being in Egypt enough to give the same message. And I guess no way am I comparing myself to any of these people, by the way, but I felt like I didn't speak in Egypt enough. Because if I was Anwar Sadat, if you will, I spoke a lot in Jerusalem, but I didn't speak enough in Cairo. And I really feel like this agenda needs to be spoken within the environmental community, within the people who are working on marine conservation, and to think about this long-term stuff. So that would be my priority in terms of marine stuff, is to focus a little bit more on the activist community and to talk about this issue to a different audience.
Yeah. The question was for the two of us, and it was a question about the demographics supporting the vernal pool program and Turn the Tide. We have done some surveys with Turn the Tide of participants, and it tends to be very similar to our membership. More women than men, probably 2/3 or more women than men. Interestingly, the actions that interest them vary too. The commercialism actions and the breaking free from junk mail seem to be a particular interest to women, and some of the more the driving action more for men. I don't know if those fit with the stereotypes or whatnot. But and as for age, they do tend to be more adults, more probably mostly median age, I think, is about 43 or so, but really spanning 20s through 60s. Less so for kids, because a lot of the actions are geared toward adults. But we do have a youth outreach program at the Center for a New American Dream, and they're developing a comparable program that will be taken out to schools for the 10 to 14-year-olds.
We seem to have two distinct groups that have made themselves visible. One would be adults who have an interest in vernal pools from trying to protect the environment, usually to stop growth, and also from protecting the animals for what they are themselves. So it's the adult component that makes itself well heard. The other is many teachers have adopted vernal pool curricula for their schools, and this seems to be spreading across the country. It fits many of the frameworks with observation, scientific experimentation, life cycles, geography, geology, and so forth. And with some of the things we've been presenting using interdisciplinary activities of writing and art and photography, it becomes a multidisciplinary activity and is very popular with grade school and middle school teachers. So therefore, there's the large demographic of children that are brought into it through their school and just grow up learning that these things are part of their environment and have a place to be, and hopefully in the future will be those that politically take care of the environment.